let me get this all set up. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about a plane designer named Willy Messerschmitt. Willy was born on June 28th in 1898 in Frankfurt, Germany. So right around the point where um, glider flights were kind of taking place in terms of like the historical development of flight, but no powered aircraft. That would be later in when the Wright brothers flew. But he began to have an interest in the glider technology of the time in Germany, and he eventually started work with a company. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but he eventually started work um, building and designing gliders. Where in 1915 he was able to secure a job and actually start developing his own ideas and not just working on other ideas that had been given to him. Um, he eventually joined the army in World War One for Germany. He didn't really have a choice. It was kind of like you go or you're a chicken, really. So he went, only served for around 2 years, and then went back working on gliders in right after the war in 1918, and actually hit the record for longest unpowered flight in 1921 with using the design of the Messerschmitt S8, which is labeled above. After a 4-year degree at the Munich Institute of Technology after the war, he founded his own company named after himself, the Messerschmitt Company, and continued his glider work. But after only 2 years, he began to sort of influence and dabble into powered flight, so using engines, and created two, actually three models: the M17, the M18, and then eventually the M20. Um, However, this success with gliders and new powered aircraft wasn't gonna last, as his least successful design became um, standard for the German Air Force, or for the German commercial aviation industry. Um, so the M20 proved to be a very faulty design, and two M20s were actually involved in a crash. Not even, I think it was 2 weeks after they purchased them from Messerschmitt in 1928, and soon the Lufthansa company completely dropped the model altogether, and the Messerschmitt company was bankrupt. So that's actually a picture of the M20. It's a nice little aircraft, but obviously didn't work too well. So eventually, Messerschmitt would actually have some good fortune. So he had gained friends in the up and coming Nazi party named Rudolf Hess and Hermann Goring, which, if you guys know your history, those are two of Hitler's closest friends and allies. Like, they were in his inner circle. So they definitely influenced his eventual rise to Germany's main aircraft producer. And they actually helped him gain a contract with the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, probably butchered that, but in 1933. Um, Through this contract, he actually developed the M37, also known as the BF 108, which will be using the BF names for his planes from now on, which was a four-seater low-winged aircraft. It was designed as a sporter aircraft, but as Miss G discussed, a lot of the things that Germany said they were designing for civilian use were actually retrofitted into military use afterwards. But this plane, if you look at the plane on the next slide, which I'll show, it's very, very similar. So that plane would be the BF 109. So this is Messerschmitt's magnum opus. This is what he's well known for. This fighter was used throughout the German military for the entirety of the war, and they continued to use it even in Spain after the war. It was just an overall great aircraft. Um, it helped replace old biplane designs that Germany was kind of sticking towards. Again, they weren't really allowed to develop military aircraft because of the Treaty of Versailles, but they still did. Um, it had a max speed of 380 miles per hour, which is impressive for the time. Um, it was the new airspeed record, and it's lightweight. and closed canopy design, which were very different from the old biplanes, made the pilots not like it at first, but eventually the speed and agility kind of overtook their hesitations, and they eventually um, loved the aircraft and eventually was adopted to the German service. Um, it would be adopted in, I think it was 1936, and it would be the largest fighter produced during the war with 35,000 aircraft produced, which was the most that Germany produced at all during the entirety of the war. So, a little bit of wartime developments. After the Bf 109 was into service, the Messerschmitt Company continued to gain funds from the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, and they continued to push the field of high powered aviation, resulting in the Bf 101 or 110, which is this picture here. It's a double engine version of the Bf 109, and a Messerschmitt 410, which I don't actually have a picture of. But Messerschmitt, while working on these projects, was cooking up something new and groundbreaking, which would be the development of rocket powered aircraft. So, in 1941, the Messerschmitt 163, also known as the Comet, took its maiden voyage, being powered by a V1 rocket engine, which the V1 was a terror weapon that Nazi Germany used to drop on Britain. It set the record for fastest flying aircraft at 700 miles per hour, even though it could only be flown for 7 minutes. So, using a lot of jet fuel, booking it, could intercept bombers, but couldn't be in the air for too long. Um, Only 370 were produced, and they weren't really the best design, but they were a big step forward in compared to what Germany had at the time. Really, anybody had at the time. But then Messerschmitt's probably one of his second most famous design would be the M262, the ME262, which is above. The first functional jet fighter with its maiden flight in 1942, which would actually beat out the British Gloucester Meteor by a year. And it first was seen in actual flight, dogfighting in 1944. So it would be mass produced near the end of the war. Hitler was kind of looking for super weapons to try and bring back the war, but it was lost at this point. So only 1,400 units were produced. It was heavily armored, and again, it was the fastest fighter out there at the point. At that point, but the Allies had better numerical superiority over the Germans, so it just didn't really make that much of a difference. But still, an incredible achievement in terms of, it's a jet fighter. That's the first time we've ever had that before. So post-war, unfortunately, Messerschmitt was not the best human being. Again, he did work with the Nazis, so I guess that's kind of to be expected. But um, the Messerschmitt Company was disbanded completely from making aircraft. The company didn't completely dissolve. It switched over to being used for, I think, sewing materials. But eventually, in 1955, um, actually no, 1952, he was allowed to start creating aircraft again. He was tried for collaborating with the Nazi regime by an international tribunal and sentenced to 2 years for obvious reasons. After he was released, he focused his company on making sewing parts, like I said above, but he was allowed to design aircraft again in 1952, and he made jet trainer aircraft for Spain, West Germany, and then Egypt. And then he eventually died on September 15th, 1978. So, in summary, Messerschmitt, though controversial person for working with the Nazis, still contributed massively to the field of aviation. I mean, he developed one of the fastest flying propeller flying aircraft, the fastest aircraft that we had at that point at 700 miles per hour with the Comet, and then the first functional jet fighter that was mass produced and used during World War II. So, you know, obviously a big smear on his reputation is working with the Nazi regime, but I feel like we can still appreciate some of what he did, even though not all of it. All right, that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great fall break.